The rain had been falling since dawn, a fine mist curling off the gray surface of Puget Sound and sliding down the walls of the mansion on the hill. From a distance, it looked like a fortress made of mirrors, reflecting nothing but clouds and sea. Glass and stone merged in a design that spoke of wealth built in shadows, of power that preferred discretion over display. Adriano Valenti sat in silence, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside the untouched dinner his assistant had arranged hours ago. He had not eaten at the table since the day the plane went down. He still remembered the call, the static, the way the world had gone soundless afterward. 3 years later, that silence had never left him. The house had been built to celebrate life, a testament to his late wife Eleanor. She had filled it with music and paintings, each corner touched by her color. Now the walls were bare, the piano mute, the canvases locked away in the west wing. He kept them there because he could not bear to look at them, but could not bear to throw them away either. The staff changed every month, none stayed long. They could not stand the cold quiet or the man who never spoke more than necessary. The ones who did stay learned quickly not to ask questions about the men in dark suits who came and went at odd hours, about the phone calls in Italian that drifted from behind closed doors, about the envelopes of cash that exchanged hands in the foyer. As evening fog rolled in from the water, turning the city below into a blurred constellation, the mansion stayed dark except for the faint glow of the fireplace in the study. Adriano sat there each night, suit jacket draped over the chair, sleeves rolled to his elbows, staring at flames that refused to warm him. The world still called him a businessman, though those who knew better understood what kind of business he conducted. But the man behind the glass walls was simply a widower, haunted by the sound of an engine that never landed. At the front door, a car engine stopped. Through the rain, a young woman stepped out, her hair damp, her uniform pressed but simple. She paused at the massive entrance, seeing her reflection blur in the condensation on the glass. She took a breath, steadying herself before pressing the intercom. The voice that answered was low, controlled. Third floor, the study. The doors opened automatically, revealing a hall of steel and marble that seemed to swallow sound. She wiped her shoes carefully, clutching her cleaning kit to her chest. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic tick of a clock echoed. No other human noise. She followed the voice's direction, her steps careful against the polished floor. The house felt like a museum, beautiful and lifeless. Every surface gleamed, but nothing felt lived in. He was there, sitting in a leather chair by the window, the light from the storm casting faint ripples across his face. He did not look up when she entered. Adriano Valenti, 38 years old, had the kind of stillness that came from deep exhaustion rather than peace. His dark hair had grown longer than it should be, his beard uneven. There were no corporate photos on the walls here, only shadows. The only photograph left in sight was of a woman laughing in sunlight, holding a paintbrush. The edges of the picture were worn from years of touch. Without turning, he spoke. "You start tomorrow. 6 sharp. Kitchen, hallway, guest rooms." His voice was quiet but absolute. "Do not enter the west wing." She nodded even though he could not see. "Yes, sir." He gave a small, absent nod. Then he added, voice dropping lower, "There will be no music, no talking unless necessary." The woman's name was Mia Alvarez, but he did not ask. He had stopped learning names, they always left. When she left that evening, the rain had deepened, washing the glass clean for a moment before fog claimed it again. That night, alone in the study, Adriano poured another glass of whiskey and stood before the window. The sea stretched endless and gray, the city a faint shimmer in the distance. He remembered Eleanor's last words before she boarded that flight. "Don't stop living. Promise me, Alex." He had promised. He had failed. Downstairs, the cleaning company had left a small note on the counter confirming the schedule. He almost discarded it, but stopped when he saw a single line written in neat handwriting at the bottom. "Thank you for the opportunity. M. Alvarez." A stranger's handwriting. Delicate but steady. He stared at it longer than he should have, until the paper blurred in his vision. The clock struck 11. The storm intensified, rattling the windows. For a fleeting second, the house felt alive again, as if the wind were a voice calling back what had been lost. He sat down, firelight flickering across his tired face. He did not know it yet, but the sound of the rain outside would one day remind him of the moment everything began to change. Mia Alvarez arrived the next morning before sunrise. The clouds hung low over the bay, turning the water a cold silver that matched the mood of the house. She stood at the gate, waiting for the security code to accept her entry, clutching a paper cup of cheap coffee that had already gone lukewarm. It was her third job this month. The last two had ended abruptly. Yet something about this assignment pulled her forward despite the dread she felt. The mansion loomed like a glass cathedral, beautiful and empty. She could almost hear her mother's voice reminding her that every job, no matter how small, deserved respect. When the door clicked open, she whispered to herself, "One day at a time," and stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was the stillness. Even the air felt controlled, too clean. She removed her shoes at the entrance, afraid to leave a trace of her presence. The scent of cedar polish mixed with faint whiskey and something else. Cigars, maybe. Leather. Somewhere upstairs, a door shut softly. She didn't expect him to greet her. Men like Adriano Valenti existed in a different orbit, surrounded by money, power, and silence. She walked through the great hall, her reflection echoing across the glass walls. Every surface reflected her back like a ghost trespassing. She unpacked her cleaning tools and started with the kitchen. The marble counters gleamed under the soft morning light. Everything was precise, untouched. Only a single coffee mug on the counter betrayed that someone still lived here. She picked it up, rinsed it carefully, and placed it back where she found it. It felt wrong to disturb the order he had built around his grief. Hours passed. She moved quietly from room to room, dusting shelves, wiping away fingerprints that were barely there. Each space had its own story. The dining room table was set for two, but dust had settled on the plates. The living room held a grand piano, its surface polished but keys untouched. The west wing was sealed behind a frosted glass door marked by a digital lock. She paused before it, sensing a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The air there felt heavier, as if holding its breath. She didn't need to open it to know it was sacred ground. Every house carried one forbidden door. Around noon, she heard footsteps. Turning, she saw him standing at the end of the hallway, tall, expression unreadable, wearing a dark sweater that contrasted with his pale skin. His eyes were gray, like rain before a storm. A gold ring gleamed on his right hand. He said nothing for several seconds. Then quietly he asked, "You found everything?" "Yes, sir," she replied, unsure if she should meet his gaze. "Good," he paused. "Lunch is delivered at 1. You eat in the kitchen. You leave at 5. He was about to walk away when he noticed something different, the faint hum of a tune under her breath. It stopped the moment she realized he was listening. "Sorry, sir," she said quickly. "I forget sometimes. What were you singing?" "Just an old Spanish song. My mother used to hum it when she cleaned." He looked at her for a moment longer, as if weighing the sound of a memory. Then he said, voice flat, "The house doesn't need music." And he disappeared down the hall. She exhaled slowly. The encounter lasted less than a minute, but it left her strangely shaken. There was something behind his eyes, a grief too disciplined, like a wild animal locked in a cage. Days turned into weeks. Mia came and went like clockwork, her presence barely acknowledged. She learned the rhythms of the house, the sound of his footsteps at dawn, the low murmur of phone conversations in Italian from behind the study door, the occasional visitor, always men in dark suits who never smiled, who spoke in hushed tones and left in black cars. She never asked. It wasn't her place. But she noticed things, the way his hands shook slightly when he poured whiskey, the way he stood at the window for hours, staring at nothing, the way he touched the photograph of the woman with a paintbrush just once before turning away. One morning, she found him asleep in the study, still dressed, his head resting against the chair. A half-written letter lay on the desk beside him, the ink smudged. She couldn't read the words, but she saw the name at the top. Eleanor. She covered him with a blanket from the nearby couch, moving as quietly as she could. He didn't wake. For a moment, she saw past the hardness, past the control. She saw a man drowning in silence. When he woke hours later, the blanket was folded neatly on the couch. He never mentioned it. Neither did she. But something shifted. The next day when she arrived, there was a cup of coffee waiting for her in the kitchen. Still hot, no note, just the cup. She looked up at the ceiling, as if she could see through it to where he sat in his study. Then she smiled just a little and got to work. It became a ritual. Every morning, a cup of coffee. Every evening, a quiet good night as she left. No conversation, no small talk, just the smallest acknowledgement that she existed. Weeks became a month, then two. One afternoon, as she cleaned the living room, she paused before the piano. The keys were dusty, neglected. She ran her finger along them, feeling the smooth ivory beneath years of disuse. Without thinking, she pressed a single key. The note rang out, clear and sharp in the silence. "Do you play?" She spun around. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. "A little," she admitted. "My grandmother taught me." He walked closer, his steps slow. "Play something." "Sir, I play." It wasn't a request. She sat down carefully, her fingers hovering over the keys. Then she began. A simple melody, soft and melancholic. A song her grandmother used to play on Sunday mornings, when the world felt safe and small. She closed her eyes, letting the music carry her away from the glass mansion, away from the man who watched her with unreadable eyes. When the last note faded, the silence returned, but it felt different now, softer. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. She looked up at him, surprised. His face was still composed, but something in his eyes had changed. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once, then turned and walked away. But at the door he paused. "You can play whenever you want, if you'd like." And then he was gone. That night, alone in her small apartment across the city, Mia thought about the man in the glass mansion, about the photograph he touched, about the grief he carried like armor, about the way his voice had softened when she played. She thought about the blanket she'd covered him with, about the coffee he left for her, about the permission he'd given her to fill his silence with music. And she realized with a strange certainty that something was beginning, something neither of them had planned, something that scared her more than she wanted to admit. The following weeks passed in careful rhythm. Mia came at dawn and left at dusk, her presence becoming as much a part of the house as the rain that washed the windows clean. She learned to read Adriano's silences, to know when he needed space and when he needed company, even if he'd never admit it. She discovered small things about him, that he drank his coffee black, standing at the kitchen window, that he paced when he was thinking, wearing a path in the carpet of his study, that he touched Eleanor's photograph exactly twice a day, once in the morning, once before bed, as if checking to make sure she was still there. She learned about his world in fragments. The phone calls that came at odd hours, always answered in rapid Italian. The packages delivered by men who never smiled, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with tape. The nights when he didn't come home until dawn, smelling of cigar smoke and exhaustion. She never asked. It wasn't her place. But she noticed the way tension lived in his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists when certain names came up in conversation, the way he sometimes stared at nothing with eyes that had seen too much. One morning she arrived to find blood on the bathroom sink. Just a few drops, already dried, but unmistakable. Her heart stopped. She cleaned it without comment, but her hands shook. That evening he appeared in the kitchen while she was preparing to leave. His right hand was wrapped in gauze. "Accident?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Something like that." She wanted to ask more, but the look in his eyes stopped her. So instead she walked to where he stood and gently took his injured hand in hers, examining the bandage. "It's fine," he said. "Let me see." "Mia, please." He sighed but allowed her to unwrap the gauze. Beneath was a clean cut across his palm, already stitched. Professional work. She rewrapped it carefully, her fingers gentle. "You should be more careful," she said softly. "I'm always careful." "Not careful enough." She looked up at him. "I know I don't have the right to worry about you. I know this is just a job. But I do worry. I can't help it." Something shifted in his expression. "It's not just a job. Not anymore." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. "I should go," she said but didn't move. "Stay. For dinner. There's too much food anyway." It was the first time he'd asked. She should have said no, should have maintained the professional distance. But instead, she Instead, she nodded. They ate in the kitchen rather than the formal dining room. Pasta from a local restaurant, neither of them particularly hungry but going through the motions. The conversation was halting at first. Careful. How long have you been in Seattle, Padmas? He asked. 2 years. I came here because I heard it was expensive, which meant wealthy people who might need housekeepers. Practical. Necessary. My mother's medical bills don't pay themselves. He nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility. What's wrong with her? Diabetes. She lost her insurance when the company she worked for went under. Now everything's out of pocket. Mia pushed pasta around her plate. That's why I work 3 jobs. Or did, before this one. This pays more? You pay more than anyone else. Honestly, more than I should accept. You earn it. His voice was firm. This house hasn't felt lived in for years. You make it feel less like a tomb. The honesty in his words caught her off guard. I just clean. No, you do more than that. You open curtains I've kept closed. You put fresh flowers in rooms I've abandoned. You hum while you work, and that sound, he paused. It reminds me that life still exists. Mia felt heat rise in her cheeks. I can stop humming if it bothers you. Don't, please. He met her eyes. I lied before. The house does need music. It needs life. I just forgot that for a while. After dinner, he didn't immediately retreat to his study. Instead, he walked her to the door, a small courtesy that felt significant. Thank you, he said, for staying, for caring about the hand. Anyone would. No, they wouldn't. Most people are afraid of me, or of what they think I am, but you look at me like I'm just a person. That's because you are. He smiled slightly, sadly. I'm not sure that's true anymore, but I appreciate you thinking so. As she drove home that night, Mia's mind raced. She was falling into something dangerous. She knew it, could feel it. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was becoming something else, something complicated and potentially devastating. But she couldn't bring herself to walk away. The weeks that followed felt like spring arriving after an endless winter, slow and tentative, as if afraid the cold might return at any moment. Mia began playing the piano every afternoon, at first just for a few minutes, testing the boundaries of his permission. But he never stopped her. Sometimes she would see him standing in the hallway, half hidden in shadow, listening. He never came closer, never spoke, just listened. The music seemed to change something in the house. The air felt less oppressive, as I am. The light, filtered through the rain-streaked glass, seemed warmer somehow. One evening, as she prepared to leave, he appeared in the foyer. He held an envelope in his hand. For you, he said simply. She opened it carefully. Inside was cash, far more than her usual payment. Sir, this is too much. You stay late. You do more than required. His voice was flat, factual. Take it. She looked at him, trying to read his expression. But as always, he gave nothing away. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once and turned to leave. Then he paused. There's a dinner tonight. Business associates. You don't need to stay. But if you do, the kitchen will need preparation. It was the longest sentence he'd spoken to her in weeks. I can stay, she said. His eyes met hers for just a moment. Good. The business associates arrived at 8. 3 men, all in dark suits, all carrying themselves with the same controlled stillness that Adriano had. They spoke in low voices, mostly in Italian. Mia stayed in the kitchen, preparing plates of food that an outside caterer had delivered. She could hear fragments of conversation, names she didn't recognize, numbers that meant nothing to her. Once she heard Adriano's voice rise slightly, not in anger, but in emphasis. The word familia repeated several times. Family. When the men left, near midnight, Adriano came into the kitchen. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. You should go home, he said, or it's late. I'll clean up first. Leave it. Sir, Mia. It was the first time he'd used her name. The sound of it in his voice stopped her. Go home. Please. She nodded slowly, gathering her things. As she reached the door, she turned back. Are you all right? The question hung in the air between them. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer her. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anymore. She wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but she didn't know how, so she simply nodded and left, the weight of his honesty following her into the night. The next morning, she arrived to find him in the living room, standing before the piano. He didn't acknowledge her entrance, just kept staring at the keys as if they held answers to questions he hadn't yet formed. She used to play, he said suddenly. Every morning, badly, but she didn't care. She said music wasn't about perfection. It was about joy. Mia set down her cleaning supplies and walked closer. Eleanor? He nodded, still not looking at her. She died 3 years ago today. The words settled between them like stones. I'm sorry, Mia said. Everyone is. His voice was hollow. But sorry doesn't bring people back. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say that he hadn't already heard 1,000 times. Do you believe in second chances? He asked, finally turning to look at her. The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I'd like to. He studied her face as if searching for something. She made me promise not to stop living, but I don't know how to do that anymore. I don't know how to be anything other than this. Mia took a breath. Maybe you don't have to know. Maybe you just have to start. Start how? She gestured to the piano. Play something. He shook his head. I don't play. Then learn. Why? Because she asked you not to stop living. And living isn't just breathing. It's doing things that scare you, things that make you feel. He looked at her for a long moment. Then to her surprise, he sat down at the piano bench. His hands hovered over the keys, uncertain. I don't know any songs, he said. Then just press the keys. See what happens. He pressed one key, then another. Discordant notes that meant nothing. But he kept going, building something that wasn't quite music but wasn't quite silence either. And as he played, something in his shoulders loosened, something in his face softened. Mia stood watching, her heart aching for this man who'd forgotten how to live. When he finally stopped, he looked up at her. His eyes were wet. Thank you, he said quietly. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. That afternoon, something changed. He didn't retreat to his study. Instead, he stayed in the living room while she worked, reading a book by the window. Once she caught him watching her, his expression thoughtful. Tell me about yourself, he said suddenly. She looked up, surprised. Sir? Adriano. Call me Adriano. He closed the book. Tell me about yourself. I've had you working here for months, and I don't know anything about you. She hesitated. There's not much to tell. Everyone has a story. So she told him about growing up in a small town in New Mexico, about her mother who cleaned houses and her father who died when she was young, about working her way through community college before dropping out to help her mother pay medical bills, about moving to Seattle with nothing but hope in a suitcase. He listened without interrupting, his gray eyes focused on her face. And now, he asked when she finished, now I clean houses, try to save money, try to believe things will get better. Do you believe that? She thought about it. Some days more than others. He nodded slowly. I understand that. A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, the rain had stopped. A rare beam of sunlight broke through the curtain, painting the glass walls gold. You want to see something? He asked. Okay. He stood and walked to the west wing door. Mia followed, her heart beating faster. He pressed his hand to the lock, and it clicked open. Inside was Eleanor's studio. Canvases lined the walls, some finished, some half done. Paint supplies sat neatly organized on shelves. An easel stood in the center, holding a painting of the Puget Sound at sunset, the sky ablaze with color. She was working on this when she died, Adriano said, his voice tight. I haven't been in here since the funeral. Mia walked slowly around the room, taking in the burst of life that Eleanor had left behind. Every painting was vibrant, joyful, full of movement and light. She was talented, Mia said softly. She was everything. He stood in the doorway as if afraid to step fully inside, and I locked it all away because I couldn't bear to see what I'd lost. Mia turned to him. But you're here now, you opened the door. Because of you. His eyes met hers, intense. You made me remember that there's more than grief, that maybe I don't have to live in the dark forever. She didn't know what to say to that, so she simply walked to where he stood and placed her hand gently on his arm, just for a moment, a small gesture of understanding. He looked down at her hand, then back at her face. Something shifted in his expression, something that made her breath catch. Mia, he said, voice low, I need to tell you something. But before he could continue, his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his face hardened. I have to take this. He stepped away, lifting the phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. His voice was different now, cold, authoritative. Mia watched him transform back into the man she'd first met, the man who lived in shadows. When he ended the call, he turned to her. You should go. I have business to attend to. Adriano, please, just go. She nodded, hurt but understanding. As she gathered her things and left, she looked back once. He stood in the living room, silhouetted against the darkening sky, looking more alone than ever. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the studio, about the paintings, about the way Adriano's voice had softened when he spoke about Eleanor, about the moment his hand had almost reached for hers. She thought about the phone call that had shattered the moment, about the way his voice had changed, becoming something harder, something dangerous. She knew intellectually what he was. The rumors, the carefully worded newspaper articles, the way people spoke about the Valenti name in hushed tones. But sitting with him, listening to him grieve, watching him struggle to remember how to live, he hadn't seemed like a dangerous man. He just seemed broken. And broken things, she'd learned from her mother, were worth fixing if you had the patience and the care. The next morning, she arrived to find a note on the kitchen counter. Had to leave the city for a few days, take the week off, paid. Key to the house is yours if you want to come in. Play the piano, whatever you want. She stared at the note for a long time. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. For 3 days, she didn't come to the house. She told herself it was because she needed the break, needed to catch up on her own life. But the truth was, the house felt too big without him there, too empty. On the 4th day, she broke. She used the key he'd given her and let herself in. The house was silent, but it felt different now, less oppressive. She walked through the rooms, running her fingers along surfaces she'd cleaned 100 times. She stood before Eleanor's paintings in the West Wing, studying each one. Then she sat at the piano and played. She played everything she knew, every song her grandmother had taught her, pouring her heart into the keys. She played until her fingers ached, until the light began to fade outside. When she finally stopped, she sat in the silence, her chest tight with emotion she couldn't name. That was beautiful. She spun around. Adriano stood in the doorway wearing travel clothes, a bag slung over his shoulder. His hair was disheveled, his face shadowed with stubble. You're back, she said, standing quickly. Just now. He dropped the bag and walked closer. I heard the music from outside. I thought, he paused. I thought maybe I was imagining it. You said I could play. I know, I'm glad you did. He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I need to tell you something. What did I tried to tell you before to? Okay, he took a breath. I haven't felt anything in 3 years. Not joy, not hope, not pain, just emptiness. And then you came here, and you filled my house with music, and you covered me with a blanket when I fell asleep. And you asked me if I was all right, and suddenly, he stopped, struggling for words. Suddenly I could feel again, and it terrified me. Mia's heart was pounding. Because feeling means hurting, and I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. She stepped closer to him. You're not getting to lose me. You don't know that. No, but I know this. I'm here right now, and maybe that's enough. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm but gentle. They stood like that, connected by the simple touch, the rain beginning to fall again outside. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to be with someone again. Then we'll figure it out together. He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "Mia," he whispered, "tell me to stop. Don't stop." And he kissed her, soft at first, tentative, as if afraid she might disappear. Then deeper, 3 years of loneliness pouring into the connection between them. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said, "not as the maid, not as an employee, just stay, with me." She nodded, unable to speak, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Okay," she finally whispered. "Okay." Outside, the rain fell harder, but inside the glass mansion, two broken people had found something neither of them had been looking for: hope. The next few weeks existed in a bubble of fragile happiness. Mia moved into one of the guest rooms, officially hired not as a maid, but as the foundation's assistant coordinator. The transition felt natural, inevitable, as if they'd both been moving toward this from the moment she'd first walked through the doors. She spent most nights in Adriano's arms, learning the shape of his scars and the sound of his heartbeat. He had many scars, she discovered, some from childhood, explained away with vague references to a difficult upbringing, others more recent, the kind that came from a life lived in shadows. She traced them with her fingers in the darkness, each one a story he wasn't quite ready to tell. "Do they hurt?" she asked one night. "Not anymore. Physical pain fades." "And the other kind?" He was quiet for a long moment. "That takes longer." They developed routines: morning coffee together, watching the sun rise over the sound, afternoons working on foundation plans, her ideas blending with his resources, evenings cooking together, her teaching him the recipes her mother had passed down, him learning to chop vegetables without cutting himself. "You're terrible at this," she laughed, watching him massacre an onion. "I've never had to cook. Always had staff." "Well, now you have me, and I'm not doing all the work." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I like having you." "Just like? Not love?" His expression grew serious. "I'm afraid to say it. Afraid if I do, something will happen. Like I'll jinx it." She understood. They'd both lost too much to trust happiness easily. But despite the fear, they were building something. She could feel it in the way he reached for her in his sleep, in the way he laughed more, the sound rusty but genuine, in the way the house itself seemed lighter, as if their joy was contagious. They went public slowly, dinner at a quiet restaurant where Adriano was known, where the staff treated them with careful deference. A walk through Pike Place Market, his hand in hers, both of them pretending not to notice the stares. "Does it bother you?" he asked. "The attention?" "A little, but not as much as hiding would." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to stand beside me. Thank you for letting me." But brave had consequences. He was different with her now. Still controlled, still careful, but there were moments when his walls came down. When he laughed at something she said. When he pulled her close, just to hold her. When he played the piano badly, deliberately hitting wrong notes just to make her smile. He told her about Eleanor in pieces, about how they'd met at an art gallery, about their wedding on a cliff overlooking the ocean, about her laugh and her terrible cooking and the way she'd loved him despite knowing what he was. "She knew?" Mia asked one night, lying in his arms. "Everything, from the beginning." His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. "She said she fell in love with the man, not the reputation." "I understand that." He looked down at her. "Do you really understand what being with me means?" "I know enough." "Mia," his voice was serious, "the people I deal with, the business I'm in, it's not safe. It's never been safe. That's why Eleanor and I never had children, because I couldn't guarantee their safety. But you couldn't guarantee hers either. And she stayed. And she died." The words hung heavy between them. "That wasn't your fault," Mia said firmly. "The plane crash wasn't because of your business. It was just, it was just terrible luck. Maybe, but every day I wonder if I could have stopped it. If I'd asked her not to go. If I'd been more careful about who knew about us." Mia sat up, taking his face in her hands. "You can't live like that. You can't blame yourself for every terrible thing that might happen. Then how do I keep you safe? You can't. No one can promise that. But we have now. Isn't that worth the risk?" He pulled her back down, holding her tight. You're braver than I am. No, I'm just more used to uncertainty. But the bubble couldn't last forever. It started with a photograph, Adriano and Mia leaving a restaurant together, his hand on the small of her back, her looking up at him with obvious affection. The photo appeared in a local gossip blog, then spread to social media, then to actual news outlets. The headlines were predictable. Valenti's new woman from cleaning lady to companion. Mysterious maid captures heart of reclusive businessman. And the one that hurt the most. From tragedy to scandal. Valenti moves on with household staff. Mia read them all, her stomach sinking with each word. The comments were worse. People calling her a gold digger, an opportunist, someone taking advantage of a grieving man. Adriano found her crying in the bedroom, her phone clutched in her hand. Don't read that garbage, he said, taking the phone and tossing it aside. It doesn't matter. It does matter. They're saying terrible things. About me. About us. About Eleanor. Eleanor would have liked you. She would have been happy I found someone. You don't know that. I do. He sat beside her, wiping her tears away. She told me once that if anything happened to her, she wanted me to find love again. She said love isn't finite, it multiplies. Mia leaned into him. I don't want to be a scandal in your life. You're not. You're the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years. I don't care what anyone says. But he did care. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened when he read the articles, in the way his phone calls became more frequent, more tense, in the way Enzo and Sal, his ever-present shadows, began accompanying them everywhere. Is there something you are not telling me? She asked one evening. He was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. The attention isn't good for either of us. There are people in my world who see any attachment as a weakness, something to exploit. Are we in danger? No, I won't let anything happen to you. But his voice wasn't as certain as his words. The threat came 2 weeks later. A package delivered to the house, addressed to Mia. Inside was a single photograph, her leaving her old apartment, and a note. She's easy to reach. Consider your choices carefully. Adriano's face went white when he saw it. Then it went cold, the kind of cold that Mia had never seen before. The kind of cold that reminded her exactly who he was. Pack a bag, he did, his voice deadly calm. What? Why? Because you're leaving. Tonight. Adriano T, this isn't negotiable, Mia. I'm sending you somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. I'm not leaving you. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. Listen to me. These people, they don't make empty threats. If they can get to you, they will. And they'll use you to get to me. Then we go to the police. The police can't help with this. This is my world, my rules, and my responsibility. Tears streamed down her face. I don't want to go. His expression softened slightly. I know, but I need you alive more than I need you here. Do you understand? She nodded, even though everything in her screamed to refuse. That night, Enzo drove her to a private airfield. Adriano came with them, silent and tense. At the plane, he pulled her aside. There's a house in the mountains upstate. No one knows about it except me and Enzo. You'll be safe there. For how long? Until I fix this, however long that takes. And then? He cupped her face, memorizing her features. Then I come get you, and we figure out how to live without hiding. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her, deep and desperate. I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I love you. I love you too. Then trust me, please. She boarded the plane with nothing but a brim and a breaking heart. As it took off, she watched through the window as Adriano became a small figure on the tarmac, then disappeared altogether. The house in the mountains was beautiful, isolated, safe, and completely unbearable. Days turned into weeks. Mia had no phone, no internet, no contact with the outside world, except for a single secure line that Enzo called weekly to check in. He's handling it, Enzo would say. Be patient. But patience was running out. She spent her days hiking, reading, trying not to think about what handling it meant in Adriano's world. She spent her nights lying awake, wondering if he was safe, if he was eating, if he missed her as much as she missed him. 6 weeks after she'd left, the call stopped. She waited by the phone for 3 days straight. Nothing. On the fourth day, she made a decision. She wasn't going to sit here waiting to be saved. She wasn't going to be a victim in someone else's story. She found the keys to the truck in the garage, left a note for Enzo, and drove back to Seattle. It took 2 days. 2 days of cheap motels and gas station food and growing fear. But she made it back to the city, back to the glass mansion on the hill. The gates were locked. The house was dark. No one answered the intercom. She was about to turn away when a car pulled up. Sal stepped out, his face grim. "Miss Alvarez, you shouldn't be here." "Where is he?" Sal hesitated, then quietly, "Hospital. There was an incident." Mia's world tilted. "Take me to him, now." The hospital was private, discreet, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. Sal led her through back hallways to a room at the end of a quiet corridor. Adriano lay in the bed, unconscious. His face was bruised, bandages wrapped around his ribs. Monitors beeped steadily. Mia's knees gave out. Sal caught her, helping her to a chair beside the bed. "What happened?" she whispered. "He took care of the threat, but it cost him." Sal's voice was rough. "He made sure you'd be safe. That was all that mattered to him." Mia reached for Adriano's hand, gripping it tight. "Is he going to be okay?" "Doctors say yes, he's tough, always has been." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Sal started to leave, then paused. "He told me once that you were the only good thing left in his life, that losing you would be worse than dying." I thought he was being dramatic. He looked back at her. "I don't anymore." When they were alone, Mia leaned forward, pressing her forehead to Adriano's hand. "You idiot," she whispered. "You beautiful, stupid idiot. Did you really think I'd rather be safe without you than in danger with you?" He didn't answer, couldn't answer, but his fingers twitched slightly against hers. She stayed there all night, refusing to leave, barely breathing until his eyes finally opened as dawn broke over the city. "Mia?" His voice was rough, confused. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be safe." "I was going crazy without you. Enzo stopped calling. I thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I told him not to call. I didn't want you to worry." "You got hurt protecting me, and you thought I wouldn't worry?" He tried to sit up, winced, and settled back. "It's done. The people who threatened you, they won't be a problem anymore." "At what cost?" "A necessary one." She wanted to be angry, wanted to yell at him for shutting her out, for making decisions without her, for nearly getting himself killed. But looking at him, bruised and exhausted but alive, she could only feel relief. "Don't ever do that to me again," she said. "Which part?" "Any of it. Sending me away, cutting contact, fighting alone." She gripped his hand tighter. "I'm not some damsel who needs protecting. I'm your partner. That means we face things together." He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. "You're right, I'm sorry. Promise me, no more secrets, no more pushing me away. I promise." She leaned down and kissed him gently, careful of his injuries. "I love you, even when you're an idiot. I love you too, especially when you refuse to listen to me." They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, as the sun rose over Seattle and painted the room in gold. The storm had passed, but the real work of building a life together was just beginning. Adriano recovered slowly, 2 weeks in the hospital, followed by a month of enforced rest at home. Mia stayed with him every moment, bullying him into eating, forcing him to rest, threatening to call his doctor when he tried to work too soon. "You're enjoying this," he said one afternoon, watching her fold his arms across his chest when he reached for his laptop. "Immensely. It's nice being the one in charge for once." He pulled her down beside him on the couch. "You've always been in charge. You just didn't realize it." As he healed, they talked, really talked, about the future, about what life together would actually look like, about whether it was even possible to build something normal from such complicated foundations. "I want to change things," Adriano said one night. They were lying in bed, the lights of the city glowing beyond the glass. "Not who I am. I can't undo the past. But what I do going forward." "What do you mean?" "Eleanor always wanted to start a foundation for artists who couldn't afford supplies or education. She had all these plans, notebooks full of ideas. I put them away when she died, but maybe, he paused, maybe it's time to bring them to life. Mia turned to look at him. You're serious? Yes, I have money, resources, connections. Why not use them for something good? He stroked her hair. You made me remember that there's more to life than surviving. Eleanor wanted me to live. You showed me how. Maybe this is the bridge between who I was and who I want to become. Over the next few months, the Eleanor Valenti Foundation took shape. They hired staff, established criteria, reached out to art schools and community centers. Adriano threw himself into the work with a focus Mia had never seen, as if pouring all his energy into creating something beautiful could somehow balance the scales of his past. The official launch was set for the fall, a gala at the house. The guest list was carefully curated, a mix of artists, philanthropists, and people from Adriano's legitimate business circles. Notably absent were anyone from his other life. I'm keeping those worlds separate, he told Mia. This is clean. This is ours. The night of the gala, the glass mansion transformed. Lights strung through the gardens, tables set with Eleanor's favorite flowers, her paintings displayed throughout the house, including pieces from the West Wing that had never been shown publicly. Mia wore a simple dress, dark blue, elegant but not flashy. She'd argued against coming at all, worried about more media attention, more scandal. But Adriano had been firm. You're part of this. You're part of me. I'm not hiding that anymore. As guests arrived, Mia felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers. But Adriano stayed beside her, his hand on her back, his presence unwavering. When it was time for speeches, he stood at the front of the crowd. Mia watched from the side, her heart in her throat. 3 years ago, Adriano began, his voice carrying through the room. I lost my wife, and I thought I lost myself with my daughter. This house became a tomb. I became a ghost. He paused, his eyes finding Mia. But someone reminded me that even broken things can be beautiful. That endings don't have to be permanent. That light always finds its way back. Mia felt tears sliding down her face. This foundation isn't about redemption. I can't undo my past, but I can honor Eleanor's vision. I can create something that helps people turn their pain into art, their darkness into color. And maybe in doing that, I can learn to live again. The room erupted in applause. But Adriano only saw her, standing there crying, radiant with pride and love. After the speeches, after the dinner, after most of the guests had left, Adriano found Mia on the balcony. She was looking out at the city, the lights reflecting off the water like scattered stars. You did it, she said as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. You created something beautiful. We did it, he corrected. None of this happens without you. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. What happens now? Now, he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still took her breath away. Now we live, we build, we figure out how to be happy. Is that possible for people like us? I don't know, but I'm willing to try, if you are. She kissed him, soft and slow. Always. They stood there as the last of the guests departed, as the catering staff cleaned up, as the house slowly returned to quiet. But it was a different quiet now. Not the oppressive silence of grief, but the peaceful stillness of contentment. Later in bed, Adriano pulled something from the nightstand drawer, a small velvet box. Mia's breath caught. I'm not good with words, he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring, elegant and unadorned. And I'm not asking for promises of forever, because we both know how fragile life is. He took her hand. But I'm asking you to promise now, to keep choosing this, choosing us, for as long as we have. Will you marry me, Mia? She was crying again, nodding through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and she laughed, the sound bright and full of joy. They spent the rest of the night tangled together, making plans and promises, building a future from the ashes of the past. The wedding was small, just Enzo and Sal, a handful of close friends, and a judge. They held it in the West Wing, surrounded by Eleanor's paintings. Mia wore white, simple and elegant. Adriano wore a dark suit, the same gold ring he always wore catching the light. When the judge asked if there were any objections, Adriano spoke up. Actually, yes, one. Everyone froze. Mia's heart stopped. Then Adriano turned to the painting of Eleanor on the wall. I need to ask permission. He walked over to it, standing before the image of his late wife. I loved you. I'll always love you. But she taught me how to live again. She brought light back into this house, into me. I think you'd like her. I hope you'd approve. Mia was crying openly now. So were several of the guests. Adriano returned to her side, taking her hands. Okay, I'm ready. The ceremony continued. When they exchanged vows, they kept them simple. I promise to choose you every day for as long as we have. I promise to stand beside you in light and shadow, whatever comes. When the judge pronounced them married, the kiss was gentle, reverent. Not an ending, but a beginning. The reception was held in the house, music playing for the first time in years. Mia danced with Adriano, with Enzo, with Sal, who proved surprisingly light on his feet. She laughed until her sides hurt, drank champagne until the world felt soft and golden. Late in the evening, she found Adriano standing before Eleanor's painting again. Thank you, he was saying softly, for everything, for the time we had, for making me promise to live. I'm keeping that promise now. Mia slipped her hand into his. He pulled her close. She would have loved you, he said. I wish I could have known her. You do, in a way. Everything good about this house, about me, she helped create. And now you're helping me build on that foundation. They stood there together, honoring the past while embracing the future. 6 months later, the foundation held its first exhibition. 12 artists whose work had been funded by Eleanor's legacy displayed their pieces. The opening night was packed, the reviews glowing. One artist, a young woman from a low-income neighborhood, found Mia in the crowd. Thank you, she said, tears in her eyes. I didn't think anyone would ever give someone like me a chance. Mia hugged her, and someone gave me a chance once. I'm just paying it forward. Adriano watched from across the room, his expression soft. When Mia rejoined him, he pulled her close. You're good at this. The foundation, connecting with people, making them feel seen. I learned from the best. You made me feel seen when I was just the maid in your house. You were never just anything. From the first day, you were extraordinary. I was just too broken to see it right away. She kissed him. We were both broken. We just healed each other. They spent the evening celebrating, watching people fall in love with art, with possibility, with hope. That night, back at the house, they stood on the balcony where so much of their story had unfolded. The rain had returned, gentle and cleansing. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Mia asked. If I hadn't taken that job? If you hadn't let me stay? Every day, and every day I'm grateful you were brave enough to keep showing up. She leaned against him. What would Eleanor think about all of this? I think she'd be proud of the foundation, of us, of the fact that we're living, really living, instead of just surviving. I hope so. I know so. He turned her to face him. You know what else? What? I'm happy, genuinely, completely happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. Mia smiled up at him, the rain making everything shimmer. Me neither. They kissed in the rain on the balcony of the glass mansion. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and created light together. Below them, the city glowed. Above them, the clouds began to part, revealing stars. And inside the house, Eleanor's paintings watched over them, a reminder that love doesn't end when people leave. It just transforms, becoming something new, something equally beautiful. The rain fell softly, washing away the past and watering the seeds of their future. And in the morning, the sun would rise over the Puget Sound, painting everything gold. But for now, they stood together, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the rain on glass. Home at last.